Hey everyone, this is Midnight Brands, and we are coming to you for prep on September 7th. Just wanted to wish everybody, hope everybody, I should say, had a good Labor Day weekend for those in the U.S. And why don't we go ahead and get into it? We are going to start today again, as usual, with the breadth ticker review. Again, the purpose of the algorithm review pieces here are to kind of scan through a list of about 400 tickers, give or take right now, and try to find key zones that could be of interest. With that said, kind of a disclaimer up front, not a financial analyst or advisor or any of those kind of things at all. This is purely for educational entertainment purposes. Nothing in here is a recommendation to buy or sell. Anything with equities, options, futures, commodities, derivatives, the whole 9 yards are risk. Don't take risk if you don't understand what you're doing or you don't have money to risk. If you don't understand any of that, now is probably a good time to exit. With that, we will go ahead and get started on the breadth ticker reviews for this coming week, for September 7th. So let's get into it. First one up on the list is SPXS. SPXS, if you don't recall, is the short symbol for the S&P 500, and the key zone for that one is kind of interesting. It's way up here, and by the color of the red, that tells me the algorithm has picked up that it's going to be a combo of kind of extreme ADRs, and we're definitely into some symmetrical extremes down here, as you can see. Symmetrical extremes get into the deviation, or more importantly, or better said, the distance away from their 20-day or 50-day or whatever EMA you're using to track for stuff. And I pay attention to the 20-day EMA and the 50-day EMA. That's, I shouldn't say that's part of what we pay attention to here. So first one up there again, SPXX 25 to 2468. Looks like there's also some breadth. There's some structure in here a little bit. Kind of come up, and this is into a supply and demand zone here. Next one up on the list is SDOW. SDOW, as we talked about before, gets into the inverse of the diamonds, or DIA. And so SDOW has got one zone for tomorrow, and it looks like it's going to be up here, 35.49 to 35.50. So just a little bit above today's high. Is going to be short of ADRs. Again, ADRs are the average daily range, which get into how much does this ticker move during the day. And so, you know, the last couple weeks, this has had about $1.50 to $1.11 is kind of the average daily range. So it's still interesting, a little bit on the lighter side, but you can see like there's some anchored VWAPs moving along here. And so it's a decent zone of highs. Have to see how we open and see what happens as we progress. Next one up on the list is SVIXY. SVIXY, again, is the one that tracks the VIX. It is the inverse. And its one is going to be really interesting in that I know the blue zones here are going to be where we have ADRs. And this is going to be the full, and this is more likely than not going to be the photo, or full other than outlying ADR area. And so that's definitely going to be up in that kind of nice area there. 53.84 and 53.77 is the area that I'd be paying attention to. And what's interesting is you can see here on the daily chart, we've got an anchored VWAP from August 18th, and it is coming down and just about perfect to the 20-day EMA right there. So nice little area, one to keep an eye on and have to see what happens. But it's also in a pinch, right? There's an AVWAP here from June 30th that's been kind of supporting this coming up. Moving along, we have SARC. SARC is kind of the nice one that is the inverse of ARC. So always interesting to see how all the memes and everything else, and not really memes, there's a lot of other companies definitely in that ARC K fund stuff, but SARC tracks the inverse of it. And so its key zone tomorrow is going to be right at the bottom of a supply and demand zone. Looks like there's a anchored VWAP that we've got drawn in there just below. This is likely going to be as part of a supply and demand. One of the daily pivots will be in there. And so it'll be 58.80 to 58.57. Pretty nice and tight zone. You can come in and kind of risk down to that lower end, which also has, looks like, yesterday's lows, which would be Tuesday at this point. And if you don't hit that, then just kind of stop out and watch kind of how else we progress there. So that's it for SARK. Moving along is IWN, small cap index 1 on this guy. IWM has 2 zones actually, and it's kind of interesting. It's got one at the highs and it's got one at the lows. So definitely be one to keep an eye in and try to see what and how we progress through this area here on IWM. It also has a swing A VWAP, which is these red dashed lines, or what the algo has picked up as an anchored VWAP. And the dash is telling me that it's a swing. If it were a solid red dash line, I would know that it's a daily anchor VWAP. And so it's got one up here above the highs at a supply and demand, and then it's got one down here below. So it'll be a pretty interesting setup to keep an eye on those two. 180.53 to 180.32, and then again 177.13 to 176.90. So keep an eye on that one. Next up, as part of the breadth, would be HD or Home Depot. Home Depot's key one of interest tomorrow is at a supply and demand that's kind of starting to form there at that 286 level, and you can see it kind of lining up there. A little bit of structure here. You can see kind of how it's been kind of coming into this area and wanting to reverse a bit, and then when it came below, it's kind of been bouncing away from it. So also of note, there's a transferred trend line. So this trend line here is the same one up here. So very interesting. It is just actually going to be up here. So if we break that, we could come down, but this could be another case where we come down and test and keep trying to push above. Just keep in mind there's also a supply and demand zone up here at that 299 level. IBB is up next, biotech ETF, and it's got one zone for tomorrow that we're keeping an eye on, and it is just below a supply and demand that is starting to form at the 123 area, so just right about here. And we can see we've had a lot of interactions right in this area here at this 123 spot. So the one to keep an eye on, 122.69 to 122.55. Moving next down the line will be UVXY, and then we're going to stop at Tesla here tonight on this, because after we get through actually JP Morgan here in a minute, the scores start trying to fall off as part of how everything is ranked for these RoyalFlush zones. And let's fix this real quick. I missed going through UVXY before. Apologies for that. So UVXY, if SVXY was tracking the inverse, UVXY is tracking the VIX to the positive side, and its zone is right here. So 1021 had been kind of this level back in here, where we've been bouncing for a little bit and trying to hold things. So we'll have to see kind of what we do at this level, but the bigger one is going to be down here with the 20-day EMA. And I would bet we didn't put a day view up there. Yeah, so you've got the look type of setup coming there with the 20-day EMA and the daily anchored view up. So it'll be pretty interesting to see kind of what we do there. Had some nice bounces, came in this morning, kind of jump up, come back down, and then we held this area. So it'll be interesting to see kind of what and how that plays out tomorrow. Would keep in mind after this area here, like we start getting into a lot of open space. It's just kind of ADRs in these areas here. So again, that's what the color blue tells us from the algorithm perspective. JPM here is up next. JPM, if you remember from the other night, we were talking about, had a pretty nice setup at the highs where we're coming in with this daily anchored VWAP back here in the middle of August and joining that 50-day EMA. And that's still the same zone, really. I'd have to go back and look at stuff yesterday, but you can see, I mean, that red dash line tells me that there's the daily anchor VWAP, and that is pretty spot on with that. So that'll be a really interesting setup to see tomorrow if we want to come up there. Certainly in the range of possibilities, right? 113.77. Friday was a bit of an outlier in terms of the ADR moves, but it's not unheard of. So that was a $4 move. So I mean, it's entirely possible from an ADR perspective we could go up and tag that. So keep an eye on that one this week. I think it continue to be interesting, and have to see just what and how that plays out. Last up here for the breadth prep. Again, we're going to stop. You can see the rest of these, and these all have been posted on Twitter as well. But Tesla's always a good one to take a look at. And look at that one. Same kind of thing. It is lining up and has a swing A VWAP from last week, the 26th, it looks like, coming down and joining right with that 20-day EMA in this zone here. So that'll be definitely a very interesting one. Fell, kind of came in this morning, open high, and lost it. Tried to come back up and touch again, and it got rejected at that swing A VWAP. So pretty interesting there. Have to see how that one plays out. And with that, we're going to go ahead and switch over to the overall ticker review. So key breadth prep is kind of looking at those major tickers that have a significant influence on the indices. And overall, it certainly has a lot of things that will have an impact on the indices. But certainly Apple, Amazon, all those kind of tickers have a much bigger impact if they start losing what they're doing, or they start really taking off. So with that, we're going to get into the overall review. And so with that, we're going to start off with HSY. HSY, so its key zone, a little bit of a wider zone, but it's going to be a pretty good one here with the setup. You've got 20-day EMA. This is into the ADRs. And we also have a daily anchored VWAP in there. Also noted on the daily over here, you can see there's also kind of another transfer trend line. It's not as strong as I'd like to see because it's only got, kind of one touch here, definitely a touch there. And then it's got a couple of touches over on this side, and it's kind of just missed these here the last couple of days. But definitely one that we'd be keeping an eye on. And I mean, this is definitely in that kind of sector that's been seeing a lot of activity recently with stuff, kind of consumers with Hershey's and whatever else. So, anywho, we will move on, trying to go quickly through these, or at least somewhat quickly. Next up is CSIQ. Really butchered the name on that one. So a Canadian solar one, and it had two zones on it, as you can see in there. First one is at the highs here, and up there we've got this, where is it, 46.85 to 46.57, and then the next one is going to be below at the 20-day EMA, and it's also got a supply and demand in there too. So it's really nice that the supply and demands get auto-tracked for us. It goes back, looks over time, and tries to map out what all these are, and then also pays attention, starts to track potential ones that are forming with these dashed lines is what that gets into. So that is Canadian Solar. Again, it's got two. One was up at the highs. The other one down at the lows was containing the 20-day EMA, and that was 42.72 to 42.38. And then you can see there's obviously some structure back in here, not to mention that it's triggered a supply and demand zone from looking at all the history in this kind of bottom area here. Moving next along is Walmart, WMT. So Walmart had one zone, and it's at that 133.46 to 133.01. It's definitely in a little bit of a wider supply and demand zone. As you can see, it's come in here and tried to reverse, definitely getting a bunch of wicks in this area in here. And you've also, pretty interesting enough, got a transfer trend line on this one as well. You got a couple touches here on the lows, and then one here. I mean, certainly it cuts through, but it's still reasonable. Just that upper end of the transfer trend line is a little bit meh to me in my mind. So anyways, again, daily anchored VWAP coming actually in from the highs there. is what that guy tells us, and then 20-day EMA. So interesting there on the Walmart. Next up is MOS. MOS had just one zone for it, and that was, again, Mosaic. Mosaic's one is right smack at that supply and demand. Was a gap fill. You can see, so these yellow dashed lines are gap fills, but it's also been a supply and demand there, kind of mapping it out through there. And so that'll definitely be an interesting one, and kind of seeing how that one comes through. Mosaic again was 55.34 to 55.27. Moving down the list was Baidu, BIDU, and Baidu just had one as well. Still up there, pretty decent in the flush zones. What's nice about this one is it is up into the ADR area, and this one's actually going to be up into a full ADR. So this one down here I know is going to be full other than outlying, but because of some of these bigger moves, and then today actually, and yesterday, Friday that was, were pretty smaller moves. So this is going to be kind of a full other than outlying, and this will be our full, which is going to be interesting because it's got the swing AV WAP there and the 200-day SMA, which, you know, this thing has had some problems with that 200 for the last while. It pokes its way above for a little bit, 200-day simple moving average, and then, you know, just keeps kind of losing it. So see what happens on that. Obviously a little bit of a trend line here with, you know, one touch, another one here, so not as high of a probability with that trend line, but it's still something to watch. Versus, again, the one at highs, it's got, you know, a couple different touches. Moving down next is United Airlines, UAL. UAL also just had one area, pretty small zone on that one, which is nice. So you can be wrong pretty quick, and kind of know what's happening, where you're moving on. And really, if you look at that one for UAL, I mean, right, you take your risk in there. You know you're wrong, and then there's a lot of open space between those two areas. Next one is all the way up at your ADR. So again, really the point of the algorithm and what it's trying to highlight and find is, what are the key areas? What are the key zones to pay attention to? Ignore all this other stuff in here. I mean, yeah, these are areas. There's different parts of evidence, confluence evidence and stuff in these other highlighted zones, but this is the one that's got the most evidence based upon what's happened over the last, you know, several weeks, months, years, and looking at all that historical data for supply and demand zones, anchored VWAPs, structure, you know, all that good kind of stuff. So very interesting one there on United. And then next up was Duke. Duke also just had, a lot of these just have one zone, I should say. And Duke was also at the high, so probably not as likely that we see it tomorrow. Not out of the range of possibilities. A bunch of swing AV WAPs kind of coming into this area too. What's nice again is the VWAPs get automatically calculated by the algorithm as well, and it'll look and kind of track them and see what's happening and rule them in or out based upon how things are performed. So very interesting on those VWAPs and how it's keeping track of that for us. Anyways, Duke is 109.19 to 109 flat. And again, you can also see if we get above there, I mean, you've got a lot of open space. There's probably some evidence up here, but we also try to just highlight what are the key zones for that particular day and not add all kinds of extra noise. It's about trying to eliminate and reduce the noise so we can find those key areas of interest. Moving along, next up was Starbucks. Starbucks, where was its key zone? Okay, yeah, that's right. Its RoyalFlush zone is down here at the lows. Definitely had a nice push today, kind of towards the bottom edge of this supply and demand. Right off of, you can see, just kind of built out earlier from watching and looking at this. You got a transfer trend line from the June lows up until today, and it bounced right off of that daily anchor VWAP. I mean, looks like it's damn near to the T. Not quite, but pretty darn close. And it might even actually have a swing AV from back there that I don't think I have June. Yeah, I'm not loaded all the way back to June. So In any event, Starbucks, nice kind of looking zone. You know, maybe we come back down, do a kind of a lower, higher low, I should say. Come and bounce into this one, and then continue on. Starbucks is 82.69 to 82.53. Again, as you can get a sense, like trying to find that key evidence pieces and carve them up into smaller zones. It's certainly possible to have some bigger ones in there, but you're really trying to carve them up into smaller zones. We'll do snap, and then we'll end it here. Trying to cut down on these recordings a little bit and whatnot. You can see the rest of the levels there in prep, and I'll list them off real quick here as we talk through them. Snap's big one is going to be at the highs, and it is swing anchored VWAP, and you can see there's a 20-day EMA. Again, there's going to be other structure in here as we get further along and get to a spot where we can, you know, write up some more of these algos and whatnot. We'll share this. It'll start making a lot more sense to everybody. And with that, I think that's it. If you got questions or any comments, certainly leave them in the comment section below. We'll try to get back to them and look at them. If you have other thoughts and things you'd like to see, certainly let us know. We're kind of going through and incrementally adding tickers in various days, and we're also starting to take a look at, you know, maybe we remove certain ones like Snap. You know, it's got a decent zone there. It's pretty small, but man, its ADR is pretty tight. I mean, 60 cents, 80 cents, and that's just not a lot. So yeah, stuff to keep an eye on. And I think with that, we'll wish everybody a good Wednesday, and we'll be back to hopefully do this again Wednesday night for Thursday. Thanks, and this was Midnight Brands, and we'll catch y'all later. Bye now.